Cabin crew get hit on a lot. It's no surprise in an industry full of confident, well-presented people that we sometimes find ourselves being chatted up or invited out by the hopeful person who's just boarded our plane. But did you know it can go both ways? That while you're sitting there, halfway through your movie, thinking you're just another passenger heading from A to B, you might actually be part of a competition you never knew you'd entered. The Best on Board competition, or B.O.B, as we call it. The unofficial game among the crew to decide which passenger is, well, the fittest. The one most of us would agree we wouldn't mind getting to know a little better. And chances are, even if you've unwittingly won, you'll never know. Because that's all it is. A harmless bit of fun. Something to raise a laugh and pass the time between serving chicken or beef and cleaning the loos. Wouldn't exactly be professional to take things any further, though, would it? But for today's donor, well, her B.O.B was just a little too special not to at least try. And she just couldn't help herself.
Doors to armed and cross-check.
Come fly the red eye.
Welcome aboard the Red Eye.
Auckland, New Zealand, 2015. Life was great, Maz mused as she walked through the sliding glass door of Auckland Airport. It was early and there was a faint smell of coffee in the air, everyone trying to wake up for the early rush of departures. She was quite literally living her dream, she thought, as she always did, walking purposefully across the concourse towards her gate. Maz Healy was 32 years old. She had been married, and as of 6 months ago, she had been divorced. She had got the degree, landed the big job, and climbed the corporate ladder too, but deep down, this was what she'd always wanted to do, and now, with the trauma of a marriage breakdown far enough behind her that it no longer hurt, she had applied for, and got, the job of her dreams. And she was loving life. The 4-sector days, the cramped cabin of the ATR 72, the short flights and lack of layovers, none of it mattered to her. She didn't need all of that. She was happy the minute she put on her uniform. She felt successful as she strode across the terminal pulling her wheelie bag. She got a thrill just from seeing the beaches below her and breathing in the jet fuel from an open aircraft door. Sure, a 5-night stopover in Fiji was something to aim for, but this would do perfectly well for now. And the ATR 72, it had a charm of its own, she thought with a smile as they walked out across the tarmac to meet it. The 2 pilots ahead of her, her one and only crew colleague alongside. It was small and compact. It had propellers and low ceilings. Next to the big Airbuses and Boeings, it looked like the much younger sibling. But to Maz, it had just as much personality, maybe even more. On board, her and Shelley went to their stations, one at the front and one at the back of the aircraft. Boarding would be from the rear door, and today, Maz was up front. She ran her hand lightly across the seatbacks in the short journey up, checking the seatbelts were crossed as she went. 2 coffees? She asked as the pilots ducked into the flight deck. Sounds good, one of them replied. Maz flicked on the boiler and changed her shoes, stowing her bag away for the rest of the day.
Passengers?
Shelley's voice came over the PA. Maz glanced out of the window and sighed, spotting the snake of passengers leaving the terminal and moving slowly across the ramp towards them. They never gave them much time here to get ready, but hey, she liked the passengers and liked it when they got on board. She liked talking to them and meeting new people. In fact, just last month she had bagged herself and her crew backstage passes to see Ricky Martin, just because she'd got talking to the guy in 1A who so happened to be one of their roadies. And there had been other good things too, none of which would have happened in her 3rd-floor office back in corporate world. She quickly carried out her checks, running her eye over her door and the equipment. "Ready," she called out, giving a thumbs up before turning back to quickly make the coffees. She had just enough time to pass them into the flight deck before the first passenger appeared at the rear door. Maz closed the flight deck door and moved into position, her smile already in place. The day was underway, and she was ready for it. Or at least she thought she was. What she didn't realise yet was that today was going to change everything. There were 57 passengers on the flight, and one of them had just, quite literally, taken her breath away. Maz hadn't even been looking down the aircraft when she'd felt it. Something drawing her eye down the cabin just as he lifted his head and looked in her direction. It was something that nearly all of the tall men did as they boarded, ducking instinctively, convinced they'd hit their head before realising the ceiling, at least along the centre, just about allowed it. But this guy... His hair actually brushed the ceiling. And yet he didn't hunch or hesitate. He just carried on, tall and confident, making his way down the aisle as if the aircraft had been built for him. Maz let out a low whistle, muttering, "Best on board," under her breath quietly, so that the people in front of her wouldn't hear. She ran her eye over the rest of the cabin just to make sure, but he would have been hard to beat. And she confirmed that there was no one even remotely close his caliber. He had it all. The hair, the jawline, the shoulders, and just as she felt herself start to swoon, she watched him pause, reach up, and lift an elderly man's bag effortlessly into the overhead locker. And then he smiled. And that was that. Maz was gone, already halfway to picturing the rest of their lives together. She caught herself and shook her head, letting out a small laugh. She had a job to do. No doubt he was married anyway, and she was in no way ready to get back out there. Not this side of her next decade anyway, but... she thought as the last passenger sat down and the door closed for departure. At least he would make the flight a little more interesting. And maybe, just maybe, she might just see how far she could get with him after the service was over. Because lately, she had started feeling that she was ready to meet someone new, perhaps. Fill the gap that had been left by Avi. And she definitely needed to work on her flirting skills if she wasn't going to be a spinster forever. So, who's your best on board? Maz asked as they reached the back galley with the drinks trolley. Oh, I wasn't looking, Shelley replied, shrugging. Should I have been? Maz opened her eyes wide. Are you kidding me? Did you not see 7C? Shelley laughed softly, shaking her head. Afraid not. Well, either you are blind or already in love, Maz retorted, her gaze flicking briefly over her hands and clocking the wedding ring. Either way, when we are done with this, I'm going to go back out there and spend the rest of the flight chatting him up. So far, she had accidentally bumped into his shoulder each time she'd passed, and each of her apologies had been met with a smile and a little more eye contact than was necessary, although she could have been imagining that. But Maz had a feeling she was onto something. She'd had her fair share of attention in the short time she'd been flying. Phone numbers slipped into napkins, one overly dramatic poem, even a bold, slightly awkward invitation in the galley mid-flight. But this was different somehow. This time, she was actually interested in this man. And that meant she needed to know. Was it just her? Or was he feeling it too? Oh, please, don't let this hold you back. I can put things away, Shelley said, as if reading her thoughts. She flicked her wrist and glanced at her watch. You've got 35 minutes to go bag yourself a bob. Now go. She said it like she was starting a race, and Maz felt a surge of adrenaline as she stepped back into the aisle, making casual inquiries of random passengers as she made her way up. Have you enjoyed your flight? Are you on business or vacation? A smile here, a nod there, working her way up the cabin, heart beating just a little bit faster with every row. And then she arrived at row 7, ready with her smile on, casting her eye over his thick head of hair as she came alongside, leaning slightly over as she took in a deep breath, and seeing his face up close for the first time in all of its handsome detail. His eyes shut, and his mouth just slightly parted, his chest rising up and down in slow, steady rhythm. He was asleep. Bob was fast a-flippin' sleep. Maz paused for half a second, the moment collapsing in on itself. So much for flirtatious conversation. So much for mid-flight sparks. She rolled her eyes, a faint smirk tugging at her lips in ironic acceptance, and turned on her heel back to the galley. Shelley was still putting the trolley away. "That didn't take long," she said with a questioning tone. He was asleep," Maz groaned. "Oh well, better luck next time." "Yep. 3 more sectors to find the love of my life, or it's another day of spinsterhood." Bob didn't wake up until the wheels touched the ground in Nelson. She watched him from her jump seat as they rolled along the runway, and barely took her eyes off him as they taxied to the terminal. 3 more sectors, she thought. But was there anyone else out there like him? Lost in the thought, she didn't notice at first. Didn't notice that he was awake, or that he was looking straight back at her. It was only when the captain's voice crackled over the PA announcing their arrival that she focused again, and there he was, watching her. His long eyelashes blinked slowly, his expression soft and unmistakably amused. Her cheek gave a sudden heavy thud. She snapped her gaze away, heat rising to her cheeks. Then, almost against her will, she looked back. And he was still there, still watching, still smiling. Was he amused because she'd been so obviously staring at him first? Maz gave a small, nervous smile in return, her eyes flicking away and then back again, unable to quite decide where they belonged. "Cabin crew, doors to manual." The captain's voice cut clean through the moment, and by the time she'd disarmed her door and turned back, the spell had been well and truly broken. All she could see now was the back of his head, moving steadily away as he filed off the aircraft with everyone else, and she felt strangely forlorn, as though she'd just lost something she hadn't even realised she'd had. Maz blinked, grounding herself and forcing her attention back to the cabin, to the job she was here to do. She looked around, trying to find a distraction, and then she saw it. The manifest, half poking out from beside her jump seat. Almost without thinking, she reached for it, pulling it free and scanning down the list until she found the seat number. 7C. Ben Thompson. Bob had a name. And somehow that made it worse, because it made him real. It made it feel as though she already knew him, as though in some unspoken way he already held a place in her life. And something inside her made her want to know more about him. The last few passengers drifted off through the rear door as she slipped her phone from her bag, opening her social media app. She typed in his name, expecting a flood of unfamiliar faces, but she barely had to scroll because there he was. The same face, the same eyes with the long lashes, the same thick, wavy hair with sun-bleached tips. And when she opened his profile to see what else she could find out about him, she couldn't help but notice that he had himself down as single. For a moment, she just stared. And then her fingers moved before her mind could catch up and pressed the button that said, Add Friend. Maz's hand flew to her mouth and she dropped the phone back into her bag as she realised what she'd just done. She had crossed a professional line in a job that she loved, and she knew that she should cancel the request just in case he saw it the same way, in case she had judged him wrong and he was the sort of person to report her. She pulled the phone back out again, knowing that she needed to cancel the request before he saw it. At that moment, the cockpit door opened behind her. Right, half an hour turnaround and we'll be getting them on again, he said, glancing briefly at the phone in her hand. If you aren't too busy, is there any chance of a quick cup? Maz opened her fingers and dropped the phone back into the bag. She'd cancel in a minute. No, not busy at all, she said, offering a small, composed smile. Coming right up, Captain. The next sector was over before it even started. A half-hour hop to Wellington, and then on the ground just long enough to tidy the cabin and make a cup of tea, and then they were off again. The flight time was too short to do a service. It was belts off, walk to the cabin to make sure everyone was okay, maybe a glass of water or two, and then the belts were back on again and they were securing for landing. Before she knew it, they were back in Nelson. And then, on their final leg of the day, they made their way back to Auckland. Maz hadn't even thought about Ben Thompson. He was tucked away in her memory, merged with all the other faces that she'd seen today, all of which would no doubt be forgotten by the time she closed her eyes tonight. She waved off the last passenger from the front of the plane, and her mind drifted to what she had in the fridge for dinner at home. It was one of the small things she missed about marriage, having someone at home who was thinking about that for her. Arriving back to a meal cooked and a glass of wine poured. Avi hadn't been all bad, and while she knew that they had outgrown each other, that ending things had been the right decision, there were moments, quiet ones like this, when she allowed herself to admit that she missed the companionship. "All right, that's us off," said the captain, stepping out of the flight deck, bag in hand, followed closely by the first officer. "Got me a dinner to get home to." "Me too," the first officer added, glancing at Maz. "See you soon." It was almost as if they'd heard her thoughts from behind their door and were speaking only to make her sad. "See you soon," said Maz, forcing a smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'll be right behind you." She slipped out of her heels and changed her shoes without hurrying. "Want me to wait for you?" Shelley called from the back. "No, you go on. Get home to the family," she said, giving her a wave and a smile. And just like that, they were all gone. She pulled her phone out of her bag, switching it on, and then sighed as she dropped it back in and made her way to the back to get off. The ping of a notification surprised her a little. She'd only been gone a few hours today, wasn't expecting to hear from anyone. She walked carefully down the steps at the back and across to the terminal before she pulled it out to see what it was. And then she caught her breath, because the notification on her screen was to tell her that she had a message. And the message was from someone called Ben Thompson. She didn't need to try hard to pull his face out of the hundreds she had seen and almost forgotten today, and her heart began to beat just a little faster as she opened the message. She held her breath as she read it. "Hi," he said. "I don't think we've met, or at least not officially. Are you my flight attendant?" Two weeks later, Maz walked nervously across the terminal at Auckland Airport, heading for the coffee shop where they'd agreed to meet. They'd messaged every day since the flight, but she still had no idea how this would go. And she carried a quiet fear that she might accidentally call him Bob, the nickname she and her friends had been using all along. The truth was, she'd only had a handful of dates before she'd met Avi, and although she'd grown braver since then, something about this man had her stomach tied in knots, and she had no idea how to untie them. They'd spoken on the phone, his deep voice sending a little shiver through her every time. She'd scrolled through his social media, piecing together who he was, learning every detail that she could. And with every new message, every small glimpse into his life, she'd found herself falling a little harder. Maybe it was meant to be, her friends had said. But how could she know? She wasn't a seasoned dater. She could barely understand her feelings, let alone control them. Still, she'd said yes, agreed to meet him there as he passed through Auckland on business to see if this, whatever it was, might be worth pursuing across the 350 miles between them. And then she saw him, sitting in the cafe with a faraway look on his face, Her stomach dropped. But when he looked up and saw her, when he stood and that smile spread across his face, something shifted. The thousands of butterflies that had followed her all morning settled, just enough for her to breathe. 2 hours later, when she walked away, she found herself whispering a quiet, hopeful prayer that he might want to see her again.
So how did it go?
Her best friend Bessie asked over the phone as Maz made her way to the car. I think I'm in love, Maz said without hesitation. He's just perfect. Bessie let out a kind laugh.
Are you seeing him again?
I don't know. She hadn't asked. She'd been too scared to. She wasn't sure she trusted her own judgment, wasn't sure if she was seeing clearly or just feeling too much, perhaps.
Well, pick up a bottle of wine and come here.
Bessie said.
You can tell me everything and I'll let you know what I think.
Maz smiled. I love you, Bessie. She ended the call, slipping her phone back into her bag. Bessie knew her better than she knew herself. And more than that, there was no way she could face an empty apartment right now, not with her mind racing the way it was. She didn't look at her phone as she put it back in her bag. She didn't look at it until she got back into her car in the staff car park. And then, when she did, on the screen was a message from Ben. 2 things I need you to know, it read. 1, you have the most beautiful eyes. And 2, I need to see you again. The need was in capital letters. Maz held in her breath as her eyes widened, and then she let out a low scream, a smile breaking across her face that she couldn't contain even if she tried. Her hands trembled as she turned on the engine of her car, knowing that she needed to see her friend before she wrote anything back. She didn't want to seem too keen, couldn't risk saying the wrong thing and messing it up. But deep down, she realised as she drove out of the airport and recalled the last 2 hours together, something told her that she wouldn't mess it up. There was a feeling she couldn't quite explain. Something steady beneath the nerves, beneath the excitement. Like this was meant to be. Like it was inevitable. Like her Bob might just turn out to be her Mr. Right. And he was. Yes, folks, we are pleased to say that today's episode has a good old-fashioned happy ending. And we hope that you love them as much as we do. Our donor tells us that her and her Bob dated for 2 whole years while living no less than 350 miles apart. They got married, moved overseas, had a son who apparently already has his sights set on becoming a pilot, and are now heading back to live in New Zealand where their story started. And we hope that their story gives those of you who need it a little bit of hope too. Because we know that aircrew often find themselves falling in love with people scattered across the globe. It's one of those parts of the job that brings a spark of excitement and, if it stands the test of time, a fair few challenges too. Distance, time zones, rosters, none of it's easy. But if that applies to you, and if you're a hopeless romantic like we are at the Red Eye, then you'll already know. Love, just like planes, can cross any distance, no matter how far.
The Red Eye podcast is written by Kaylee Kay, narrated and produced by me, Ali Murphy. These stories are based on true events, but certain details, characters, and timelines have been altered to protect the innocent. Visit our website, theredeyepod.com, to subscribe to our newsletter and to find out details on how you can contribute your story for us to turn into an episode. If you enjoyed listening to our stories, please like, subscribe, and review. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Red Eye podcast. You guys are why we do this. We love the stories that you have, and we love telling you the stories that people share with us. To help us reach more people and get the podcast really out there, we would really appreciate it if you left a review. It just helps our podcast be a little bit more visible. Thank you.